This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by Veg One, the multivitamin and mineral supplement designed by the good folks over at the Vegan Society. It was launched back in 2005. As I said, designed by the Vegan Society, the OGs in the game. What more trusted resource when it comes to all things vegan and all things vegan nutrition can you have than the Vegan Society? Launched back in 2005, as I said. And in 2021, they redesigned that packaging from the little plastic tub it used to come in to a wonderful new plastic-free and perfectly reusable metal design. It's wonderful. You can even pop little crayons in it. Just ask my little 3.5-year-old boy Arthur, who's got his crayons in it as we speak. Aside from that, though, it offers you all the reassurance that a multivitamin designed by vegans for vegans would give you. You've got B2 in there, you've got B6, you've got B12, folic acid, iodine, selenium, all the kind of things that everyone tells you you're going to keel over if you don't have. So it's great to know that reassuringly they're in that packet there. They're in there in a once-a-day format that's chewable, reliable, and really affordable. I think it's £12.70 for a 6-month supply. Comes in 2 flavours. You get orange or blackcurrant. What more? What more could we want, hey? So as I said, this episode sponsored by Veg One and the good folks at the Vegan Society. Enjoy.
Well, it's a long and interesting journey. And actually, my journey into veganism is kind of my journey into Ashland Creek Press as well. And when I say my, I should say our. My partner, John Yunker, couldn't join us today, but he's my partner in life and my partner in Ashland Creek Press. And we've been on this journey together for a really long time. And it all really started, I would say, when we went on a wildlife expedition to Antarctica way back in 2004. So that journey, not only did it lead to, I came home and immediately wrote a short story, which about 10 years later became my novel, My Last Continent. He came home and wrote a novel, The Tourist Trail. But most important, we came back with this sense that you could travel to the most remote place on the planet and realize that everything we do in the Northern Hemisphere affects what goes on in the Southern Hemisphere. And that was a really big awakening in terms of, how we're treating the planet and climate change. And again, this was 2004. So it was before climate change was talked about quite as much as it is today. And before it became such a, major issue. I mean, it always was. It has been since the 70s, honestly, but it really got on our radar when we did that. And the other thing that got on our radar was our use of animals for food. And in particular, we learned a lot about the marine mammals in Antarctica, penguins especially. They are just like the poster children of Antarctica. And we just came back unable to eat fish anymore because it felt like taking food from their mouths, which essentially it is. So the animals in Antarctica, their biggest problems, well, there are 3, pollution, climate change, and overfishing. So we came back from that trip done with eating seafood. And then we started wondering why we're eating other animals. And I have never eaten animals a lot in my life. I just never really enjoyed meat. But after this trip, I started wondering, why am I still doing this? It was just such a habit. I was raised to finish what's on my plate. And so it never really occurred to me to be vegetarian. But after this journey, I went along that road and just stopped eating meat. In the meantime, John had gone to an animal rights conference to research his book, The Tourist Trail. And he called me from that conference. I'll never forget that. I'd been vegetarian for a while. He wasn't there yet, but we ate vegetarian at home because, that's how we cooked. And then he called and said, I'm done. I'm out. No more meat. And from there, we sort of, did more research, learned that why are we eating eggs and cheese if we're not eating animals? The animal agriculture industry is so harmful when it comes to eggs and dairy. So it took a while to give up that last bite of cheese, but eventually we got there. And Ashland Creek Press came of that because when John wrote his novel, he sent it out. He got an agent and sent it out into the world at a time when environmental fiction wasn't a thing. And the feedback that he and his agent got was, we don't know how to market this. We don't know who the audience for this is. The Tourist Trail is an eco thriller, you might say. So, and it's set in Antarctica. One of the main characters was inspired by Paul Watson, who you interviewed on your podcast, anti-whaling activist. It's a completely fictional character, I should add, but, he's a hero to us. And he just doing what he does makes for a great story and great characters. So it's really, but the greater publishing world couldn't find an audience for that, or didn't think there was one. So we decided to self-publish it. And we had both worked in publishing for many years. So we had, all the knowledge, all the skills that we needed, or we knew how to get them. For example, the book design, and at the time, publishing was evolving quite a lot so that it was easy. There were things like print-on-demand technology that made it possible to publish a book without printing 10,000 copies, and going into that expense. So we put it out there, and at the time we also thought, well, if there's no market for John's environmental novel, or if there aren't publishers willing to create a market for it, or who don't believe there's a market for it, I wonder if there are other authors out there who might have books that need homes. So we sort of, put it out there to accept submissions and got a lot of amazing books, started publishing them. And this was in 2011. So we just celebrated last year our 10-year anniversary of Ashland Creek Press, and we're still going. So our path to veganism and our path to publishing was very much the same. And though we started out publishing environmental books of all types, it's really amazing how the big five, if you will, it's what we call them in the States, the big five publishers, they've really caught up to environmental writing. And there's a lot more of it coming out from the big presses. However, there's a lot less animal writing, very little vegan fiction, if you will, from the big publishers still. So that's where we're leaning towards. So we're sort of evolving too. Now that climate fiction and eco fiction can find homes, now that these writers have more opportunity in the larger publishing world, as a small press, we're focusing more on the animal aspects and veganism and how animals fit into the environmental and climate change issues that we're all facing.
I want to. There's loads I want to get into there, but just because you've just mentioned it, I want to ask a question about a specific point there. You mentioned that the major five, and them not necessarily wanting to get involved in the kind of the direct square on the head kind of veganism, if you like, or fiction related to animal activism, that kind of thing. Where do you think that comes from? Is that still a kind of fear of the word veganism, about not wanting to pigeonhole themselves or not wanting to alienate, potential sponsors? Where does that come from?
I wish I had a good answer for you, Jim, because it's hard to know. It's so my book, My Last Continent, was published by a mainstream publisher. So I finished that book finally, and it came out in 2016, which was almost, like maybe about 6 years after John's book came out. So a lot happened in that time. Our books are very, very different, but they still have to do with Antarctica. They still have to do with penguins. They still have to do with climate change. They both have vegan characters. So a lot changed from when John was shopping his book around to when mine got published by an imprint of Simon & Schuster. So that's how quickly it's all evolving, which is great. But that said, I did, I edited out some stuff that was, my vegan message was very subtle in that book. And I think that my guess is that it's a tough issue for a lot of readers to handle. And for the same reason that, when you go out with non-vegans and they don't really want to hear, they're a little uncomfortable about why you're vegan, because, it forces, as we learned, during our process, when you think about what you're doing to animals by eating them, it's really hard to take. And, as many vegans will say, my only regret is that I didn't do it sooner, because I couldn't believe I did that for so long without even thinking about it. Because once you know what you know, it's impossible not to know it, and it's impossible not to eat compassionately. And I think if you're not there yet, or if you're in that process, or you're faced with these realities, it's really, really difficult. And it's difficult for everyone's human. It's difficult for agents. It's difficult for editors and readers. So because there are plenty of vegan cookbooks out there, That is not an issue. We can find plenty of those. And that's about food. That's about eating. That's about choice, healthy choices. But if you're reading a novel, or if you're reading nonfiction about the reasons we should all be vegan, and a lot of it has to do, we see in these stories, the abuse, and the penguins who are starving because we're fishing their oceans for ourselves. That kind of thing is really difficult. That's what I imagine is going on. But I also know that publishing follows trends, and environmental writing is trendy now, and that's an amazing thing. It's a beautiful thing. And one day we hope that, more animal protection related literature is trending. And there's plenty of nonfiction out there, and we see a little bit of fiction as well, but not to the extent that I think we really need to awaken the world to what we need to do, because we can't save the planet without saving the animals. And there's so many ways to do that, from not fishing from our oceans to getting rid of animal agriculture, if not altogether, which I would love, just scaling it way, way down to where animals are no longer suffering so much, and to where we don't have to raise our rainforests, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you mentioned something else. Sorry, you're sparking so many ideas, thoughts in my mind, and I've got another question based on something that you just said, and it's really interesting to me. And reflecting as I'm talking about some of the things that some of the literature I've read, and some of the stuff particularly early on that got me into it, and some of the stuff that I still read now, as a point of interest and so on. And I must say, there's a lot more nonfiction, and a lot more environmentally based nonfiction, where the veganism is a Trojan horsed in, if it's there at all. That kind of stuff, at least in the environmental literature. Do you think moving the needle when it comes to fiction is a critical part of this? Because I'm just thinking about, and I'm trying to join lots of probably really arbitrary dots here, I don't know, but I'm thinking about things like, in the film world, like Don't Look Up, for example, the latest film, has had a big ripple and a big effect. I'm thinking about like documentary films, not so much fiction, but that film space where there's a story, where there's a narrative, Seaspiracy, Cowspiracy, these kind of things. They've had this massive ripple. How crucial do you think the role of fiction is in kind of moving the overall population's viewpoint of veganism, and therefore putting an end to animal agriculture and all the things we'd love to see?
I think that's a great question. And I think it's absolutely crucial. I think, and I am biased, I say this as a small press publisher, I say this as a fiction writer and as a voracious reader, but I think fiction is so powerful. And I think it's powerful in ways that nonfiction is very powerful too. But I think the tough thing about nonfiction, and even documentaries, is that it presents realities in such a way that it can be difficult. It can be depressing to learn this in these factual ways. And all the good documentaries, as you mentioned, Seaspiracy and Cowspiracy, they are amazing films and they tell good stories. But being confronted with these realities in a more subtle way is what fiction does very well. And films like Don't Look Up, that, a satire like that can really draw you in through its characters and its story and its humor. But then it sits with you for a long time afterwards, and you think about it, and it sinks in a different way. So I think fiction is hugely powerful and has that ability to open hearts and minds in ways that the nonfiction and documentaries can't do, or I think they can do it if people will see them. But I know that, and this is even with me, who I'm very interested in all of this stuff, but I do shy away from some of the nonfiction, and I do shy away from some of the documentaries, because I get a little depressed. It's hard to stay optimistic sometimes. There's a lot going on in our world that's a challenge, but I'm always drawn into a good story. 100% of the time. Whereas maybe 75% of the time I'll watch a documentary on something because I care about the issues, but a story will always pull me in. And it being fictional, I think, helps give you that bit of distance as a reader or a viewer that softens it a little bit, but it still sticks with you. And it might stick with you even more because you fall in love with characters. You laugh. A film like Don't Look Up, it reminds me of a book that we have coming out in February, which is called My Days of Dark Green Euphoria. And it's by an author, debut author, Athena Copenhaver. She does a brilliant job, just like Don't Look Up, in finding humor in the horrors that we're facing as a planet today. It's about a woman, a millennial woman, who is just living the purest life she can. She tries not to consume anything. She hasn't been on a plane in forever. She eats out of dumpsters because it's more sustainable than buying food. All this stuff that she does. And then she meets her mother, her boyfriend's mother, who is the opposite. She drives a giant car, smokes cigarettes, eats meat, just doesn't care about her carbon footprint at all. And this character kind of falls off the wagon into this world where she doesn't have to worry, where all of a sudden, she doesn't have to worry about what she eats or what she wears or how she lives in the world. And it's such a relief that she just kind of goes off the deep end and then eventually sort of finds a balance. But it's a great story. And she tackles all these issues, climate change, animal abuse, social justice. She tackles all of this in a way that's humorous and really endearing and really fun, which it sounds impossible to do, but she has pulled it off in this book. And that launches in February. We're really excited about it. And it's interesting, the timing with Don't Look Up, because I feel like the world is ready to see these issues in a way where we can relax a little, we can still absorb everything, but it's not quite as intense because you have to laugh sometimes in life. If you can't have that little bit of escape, it can be difficult. So I think fiction, whether it's film or novels, really provides that, and that people are ready for it and they welcome it.
Interesting point as well, actually, about humor. I definitely think there's a space for it, and we talked about Don't Look Up, and obviously the new book coming out there. I mean, just sounds like fantastic, actually, to be honest. What a great premise for a book, and that humor element, I think, could be potentially critical. So I'll ask a similar question to the one about fiction, but squarely about humor. Like, do you think again that the humor aspect is a specific, almost requirement for us to kind of move things forward? Do you think in some ways that the kind of the vegan narrative hasn't got enough of that in it?
I do, actually. And I wish John could join us. He really strongly believes that. And he writes fiction. He's written novels. He's written short stories. He also writes plays. And his plays in particular use humor. He loves making fun of vegans, the vegan movement, because that's a good way to draw people in. I think that, unfortunately, to many other people who are non-vegan, vegans can get sort of a bad rap because people think, oh, you're so pure, or they think we're no fun, or, they think we eat really boring stuff, and all of which is completely untrue. But, John likes to play with that in his writing, and he has written several plays that just sort of like poke fun at veganism and have a lot of fun with it. But meanwhile, the issues are there and he gets them across, and making people laugh at the same time is a great way to draw people in. I think, as vegans, we can laugh at ourselves. I think we should all be able to laugh at ourselves. We kind of have to. And but especially is helpful for drawing in people who don't know much about veganism, or who just they see vegans in a humorous light for the first time. Because I think sometimes we have this reputation as being, humorless people who just eat tofu and have sad lives, And so I think having humor in any context is great fun, and really, opens a lot of doors.
I agree. I think sometimes we impose that upon each other. Sometimes within the vegan community, there's a bit of almost, and I do feel it to some extent, personally, and I'd sort of try and check myself on it, where you sort of feel a little bit like, am I being disrespectful to the animals, to the planet, by not being solemn about this subject the whole time? Because I think we, as we talked about with nonfiction, we immerse ourselves in the realities, the horrors of whether it be the climate situation, whether it be the truth about animal agriculture, these kind of things. We immerse ourselves in it, and so it can feel a little bit like, glib, disrespectful to be humorous on it and on the subject. I do think sometimes that gets us in a bit of a trap there, in terms of we're not then reaching across the divide, if you like. We're not able to open up if we're not able to be a bit more free, loose laugh at ourselves, etc. With particularly with non-vegan folks. I think it's a really powerful point you make. More just amusing than a question.
No, I agree with you. It is, knowing what we all know as vegans, it is difficult to laugh sometimes because it is very serious. And it is hard to be glib about it because, sometimes among non-vegans, I just feel like this urgency for everyone to go vegan. And it can be really difficult to be among people who are eating animals, eating dairy or eggs. It's difficult, it's a form of violence that's right in front of you. And but to cut those people out of our lives does a disservice to the animals. And I think that the way I justify writing using humor or publishing humor is that it draws more people to the realities, and hopefully that'll change minds. But I do think that's true. We should never lose sight of that serious element. Why are we doing this? And that's always a big part of it. But I think everyone's journey is just John went vegan overnight or vegetarian overnight, stopped eating meat overnight, but becoming completely vegan, it's usually a slower journey. And I think everyone has, his or her own journey. So you never know how people are going to get there. But I feel as writers and publishers, we try to use every means possible. And if that means I remember we took a trip, John and I, and it was kind of a group tour. We were in Tasmania and on like a hiking and camping expedition, and it was great. And we were the only vegans in the group. There were about, I think, 8 of us. And I just remember people learning that we were vegan and sort of like deflating a little bit. And then happy hour came along and we were just, all having wine and beer. And they said, "You drink?" they thought we couldn't be fun because we ate vegan food. And the vegan food that we ate, they tried, they liked. I mean, and one of the things that I do that I think is the most positive thing is just to share vegan food with people. And that's really gone a long way with friends I have who, I have several friends who weren't vegan when I met them who are now, or mostly, and they certainly always are when I'm there in my presence. But it's been really wonderful to see the evolution of people who, like, just by silently, I'll answer any question that people ask, but I don't really go out there and say, like, "Why are you eating that burger?" Or do you know how that cheese got to your plate? Something like that. But just cooking a Beyond Burger for someone or making a vegan dessert that's delicious, and then letting people know, like, "Oh, did you know that, that's vegan?" It really goes a long way because it just sort of, shows them that it doesn't have to be bland, horrible food, which weirdly, even now, a lot of people still think that.
Yeah, absolutely. There is still that misconception, and there's a growing misconception as well that I think there's either bland, very sort of pious sort of food, if you like, versus versus vegan junk food. There's this kind of that's it. That there's no happy medium, and actually, like you say, there are so many, just like there are so many ways to eat omnivorously, there's so many ways to eat vegan. You can cultures different. I love that idea of we've got to almost showing people that helps break down some of those stereotypes, that it's not just either this way, that way, and either it's boring or unhealthy, and there's no in between. Of course there is.
Right.
Yeah, I want to go right back to the beginning, if that's all right, because there was a question I wanted to pick up on, but I got excited by another question that popped into my mind when you were talking, and just a subject that interested me. But I want to go right back to Antarctica and your initial kind of pivot point, the point where you started to think, actually, there's something wrong here. Was there anybody guiding you to that on that trip? Or was this just kind of, we're observing this, we're putting 2 and 2 together and kind of making 4? Or was there somebody there who was kind of saying, well, actually, this is happening because of X, Y, and Z?
A little of both, actually. So it was an expedition where we had naturalists on the ship, and to teach us about the wildlife. No one made a point about not eating fish. They served fish on board, and as a matter of fact, which we found kind of appalling, in retrospect. But it's an interesting thing that I bring up in my novel, in My Last Continent. The novel that I wrote, the character is a penguin researcher, but she goes to Antarctica on tour ships. That's how she funds her research, or that's how she gets to Antarctica. She's kind of an independent researcher. And that's based on an actual organization called Oceanites. And when we were on the trip that we were on, we met several people who, they worked for this organization, and they would be naturalists on board, and that's how they got to Antarctica. So they would travel down to Antarctica, the Antarctic Peninsula, with us, and then we'd leave them there, and they'd camp for several weeks, study the penguins, and then another tour group would pick them up and take them back north. So I was really inspired by that, because I thought that's so interesting. There are research stations in Antarctica, but that are mostly, that are run by various governments around the globe. But this was an independent organization. I thought that was so wonderful that they're doing this independent penguin research, counting penguins. So, but the interesting thing about that, which I explore in my novel, is that dichotomy that you've got between tourism and protecting this continent.
Yeah.
So in the novel, my character has a real problem with this. They serve seafood on board because that's what the guests expect. And yet she has to go along with that to get down to Antarctica to study the birds. And by studying them, she can then let people know what their numbers are, how their species are doing. And the numbers show that they're traveling farther and farther for their food, because we're fishing, in their oceans. And a lot of the Antarctic is protected. But, as Paul Watson said on your podcast, when an area is protected, that's where the poachers go, because that's where the fish is. And that's a really sad reality. And that's why we are grateful that Sea Shepherds, the Sea Shepherd Society is out doing what they're doing. But yeah, tourism is a whole other thing. And it's a very, very, very interesting. But to get back to your question, we learned a lot about it, but not in the same way that we took home with us. That no one said, don't eat fish. It's not good for the birds. It's not good for the whales to take the krill out of the ocean. But we got back and thought about that and realized this is what's going on. And they can't do that because they're trying to, take passengers to see this world. And I don't have a problem with tourism, because it changed our lives, and I think it has the power to change lives. And if even half of the people who go to Antarctica come back and don't eat seafood, or make major changes in their lives to help combat climate change, that's worthwhile. So even though more and more tourists are going there, it's more than double the number that it was back when we went. So it's really growing in a way that is not going to be sustainable forever. But right now, the bigger problems facing that region are pollution and overfishing and climate change. So if people can come back and be ambassadors for the continent, then that's, one way to combat those other bigger issues.
This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by Veg One from the Vegan Society. Veg One is the nutritional vitamin and mineral supplement designed for vegans by vegans. Launched back in 2005 and rebranded in 2021 with a fantastic new plastic-free package, Veg One provides nutritional support alongside a healthy and balanced vegan diet, all for an affordable price. With a 6-month supply available for just £12.70, Veg One will cost you little over £2 a month and offers EU nutrient reference values, or NRVs, of vitamin B12, D3, iodine, selenium, B2, B6 and folic acid. Veg One is chewable, it's affordable and reliable, you can take it once a day, it's available in fantastic orange and blackcurrant flavours, super easy and convenient, completely plastic free. So why not head over to vegansociety.com, search for Veg One and take your next healthy steps into the world of veganism. It's a real difficult one, that, isn't it? The tourism, the travel one. I've wrestled this before myself. I've spoken to some folks in the sort of, vegan travel companies and so on. And I wrestle between flying traveling to places, all these kind of different things, the carbon footprint, the damage of that versus the, like you say, the messages you bring back, the lessons it's a real difficult one to know which way to fall. And without doing that calculation, you raise an interesting point there about, if 50% came back and this happened, would that almost pay the price of those folks going there? How do you calculate it? It's so difficult.
I know. I wish I could. It would be great to be able to do that. And I'm not sure that even 50% come back as changed as we did. It's really hard to know. And I agree with you about travel, because that's, we have a really small carbon footprint overall in everything we do, but travel is just what we love so much. And, we haven't gone anywhere for more than 2 years with the pandemic. So, we've been homebound for a while, but we do feel like when we do go anywhere, we have to be able to justify it. It has to be, it has to be worth it. It has to be something that needs to be done for a certain reason, and, and not just do it frivolously, because it does matter.
It's consciousnness, isn't it? Like with
absolutely,
when you become vegan, it's a conscious decision about what you're going to do 3 times a day, at your dinner table, and I do find from that was a jump off point for all kinds of different questions in my life, and it's still going now. I think I've talked about on the podcast before about like bank accounts and things, like not realizing at first, that this bank account that I had, that company put X amount of money into fossil fuel companies and companies who supported animal agriculture. And so okay, so which banks don't, and how do and then you find they're sort of somewhere they're underwritten by somebody else. And it's a messy world to take this personal action, isn't it?
It is, and I totally agree. And that's what Athena's book, that's what My Days of Dark Green Euphoria does so well, is it just captures that eco-anxiety. And I've been there. I remember being in Seattle right around the time, I think it was just before eating my very last piece of cheese, but, right when we were almost 99% vegan. And we were living downtown Seattle. I walked over to Whole Foods to get some groceries. And I remember having that anxiety where I saw this wonderful vegan food, prepared foods, and it was beautiful. And I was really excited about getting all this vegan stuff. But it all came in little plastic tubs. And I freaked out about the plastic. And I thought, I can't do this plastic. I can't buy something that comes in plastic, And so I think I left without even like a carrot stick. I think I got so overwhelmed. I just left the store. And so I had that little moment of absolute madness. And that's what this novel captures really well, is that you can go so crazy. And if you want to be the best person you can and be the best steward for the planet, you have those moments, you go there. And then it's all about finding the balance though, and doing what you can and realizing that none of us can be absolutely perfect, but we can do the most good or the least harm, if you will.
Yeah.
But it's impossible to be perfect. So we have to find that balance somehow, which can be really difficult, as you say. Once you learn one thing, you learn another, and it goes on and on.
You just keep going down the rabbit hole, and it doesn't stop. That's the problem.
Exactly.
That's the problem. You mentioned COVID when we were talking about travel just then. It might be a naive question. You might go, not at all. But how's it affected publishing and the kind of the literary industry? Has it had much of an impact, positive or negative?
A little of both, actually. So in the beginning, everything kind of came to a screeching halt, and we had a lot of shutdowns here. So bookstores suffered a lot because people couldn't go in, and there was a lot of disruption in the early days of the pandemic. But then as things went on, as the pandemic dragged on, bookstores got online and learned to sell things through their, online stores, and publishing slowed down a lot just because people weren't taking submissions and getting new books out, and then supply chain issues have caused a lot of delays. But I think on the whole, it's been pretty even, if not a little better, for books and publishing, because people are reading more.
Yeah.
I know that social media, Netflix, there's so many ways to compete for people's time, and books in the last decade have been, getting smaller and smaller in terms of the, greater scheme of things. But the pandemic did help. Book sales have been up overall because people are home and people are reading. So that's very good. And events are a problem for a lot of readers.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of writers, who have books coming out. And book tours and live events, whether it's conferences or book festivals, those have all suffered quite a bit, but they've also gone online. And there have been a lot of new opportunities for writers and publishers. One thing that we did, which wouldn't have happened without the pandemic, is we started a class called Writing for Animals, which is something we've wanted to do for a long time. And we envisioned it as a conference, but weren't sure how that was going to look and how we would do that. So we were putting it off. And it's based on a book that we published in, I think, 2018 called Writing for Animals, which is just a series of essays and articles about how writers can portray animals more authentically, more empathetically, more compassionately, more realistically in their writing. And like a pro-animal writing book where animals aren't, afterthoughts, for example, or props. And so that's a work that we really love. And so with everybody learning Zoom and it becoming so easy, we decided to put it out there and have a class. And so we did it, I think, 3 times last year, and now it's online. So a self-paced version of it is online so people can do it anytime, anywhere. And that was something really positive for us to come out of that as a small publisher.
What a fantastic resource to offer. I love that. That's amazing. And a great subject matter as well.
We have loved it. And every time we teach the class, we just tell the writers, participating writers, we love this even more than you do, because the feedback has been wonderful. So it's nice to know that there are people who love animals, who want to advocate for animals in their writing, and we're helping them to do that. But we get so much out of it, just that sense of community, which is really important, as as a vegan, as an animal activist in our own way. That's really lovely to see, to come together with people who want to do that and who want to advocate, become literary activists in a way. And so it's been a beautiful thing. And we've done a couple open mics with the alumni, and we've got we've got more ideas in the works to just keep the alumni community going and to keep offering the class and, maybe additional classes with other people. It's going to be good. And it was nice to see that the audience is there for it. So we were glad to be able to do it.
Oh, it's amazing, really is. That was actually going to be a question of mine, and you may have started to answer it there, which was, as one of the impacts of COVID, the shutdowns and so on, has there been an uptick in submissions and budding writers coming to you?
A little bit. So we do have submission periods. So we're not open to submissions year round, or we would just drown in reading.
Right.
So we have to do it at certain times of the year and for certain projects. But one thing we did just close the Siskiyou Prize. One thing, I forget what year it was. I think we founded it in 2015 or something. We started this award for environmental writing, and it's called the Siskiyou Prize for New Environmental Literature. And we put the new in there to make clear that this is environmental writing that doesn't have to do with like hunting and fishing and using animals, because a lot of environmental writing actually is about that. People write an essay about fishing with a family member and they think they're being one with nature, and they are in their own way. But we don't want our, environmental writing to be about taking from nature, but about protecting nature. So that's the goal of the prize. And so it's for any full-length manuscript across many genres. And we did get a record number of submissions this year. I think that it's in every 2 years we have this award, and it comes with a cash prize and a writing residency. We partner with a residency in Oregon. It's an organization that offers space for writers and classes and workshops called the Sitka Center. And they're wonderful. They're up a little bit north of us in Oregon. This is Gideon. He's deciding to get up. I wonder. No, he's not going to see us. He's just going to change his little sleeping position.
Fair enough.
So anyway, so the Siskiyou Prize, we did notice that we got a lot more submissions for that this time around. And it might have been because of the pandemic. But from what I've heard from others in the publishing industry is that, yeah, writers are dusting off their manuscripts and sending them out. So I think in the years to come, my hope is that we'll see a lot of good animal writing and environmental writing out there.
Yeah, and I suppose, publishing companies like yours are almost giving people the permission, the sort of almost saying there is a home for you here, which is, I imagine, in part the kind of the license that people need to get going in this space.
I hope so. Yes, I do. And I hope that, we can only do so much. We receive far more than we can ever publish. And that's the only thing, is that we are too small to publish all the good environmental work that's out there. So I do hope that our existence helps people work on their environmental writing. And I hope they keep sending it out everywhere, because there are a lot of independent presses out there. And even the big five have hundreds of imprints. And I just hope that the momentum keeps going for environmental writing, and then even more so for animal writing.
How have things, you mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but how sort of, the 3 or 4 things that you think have kind of tangibly changed since you set out on this journey as a publisher in the environmental space?
Well, there's definitely more room for environmental writing. The term cli-fi came out after we started our press. So climate fiction. Yeah, I love it. It's wonderful. So there are, another thing that we do is called Ecolit Books, and it's sort of it's become a lot more than it, over the years. It started out as a book review site where we would publish book reviews of all environmental literature, not just what we publish, which is only a few books a year, but, all sorts of environmental works, including old classics, including old classics like the Monkey Wrench Gang, for example. We have a review of that. And so it's just a place to go to learn more about environmental literature. And so we have about half a dozen active contributors who write reviews on books, children's books, young adult, fiction, nonfiction, and that's really great. But there are several of those out there. Climate Fiction Writers League is one example. They support writers who are writing in climate fiction, and could be young adult, could be children's books. So there are a lot of sites out there as we've seen them crop up. There are a couple of independent, environmental publishers out there. There are vegan publishers as well, but none that I am aware of that publish fiction. So I think we're the only ones who really published, that fiction novels and short stories. But it's been nice to see all of that evolve in a positive way. And there are even a few books out there that are very animal rights oriented that the big publishers have done, one of which is Karen Joy Fowler's novel, We Are All Completely Beside Ourselves. That's very much an animal rights novel. What else? Oh, a new novel, that came out in the last couple of years called Barn 8 by Deb Olin Unferth. She happened to be our Siskiyou Prize judge this year. She's a vegan writer, and this book is about a chicken rescue. And I was just amazed and thrilled to see that came out. It came out from an independent press called Grey Wolf Press, but that's a huge publisher compared to us. So I thought that was a really big step forward to have sort of, this animal rights novel about a chicken rescue from a pretty big publisher. So yeah, things are evolving in the right direction, I think.
Sounds like it. Absolutely. You've obviously been in publishing for a fair while and been a writer for a fair while too. From all of the connections you've made over the course of time, has anybody reached out to you from the kind of the big five, the perhaps the sort of the non-vegan or non-environmental kind of space, the sort of more mainstream publishing world or writing world, and sort of asked you about what you're doing? Have you noticed any of that in recent years? Like people sort of saying, I'm kind of interested in this space. What is it that you do? Kind of now I'm a bit more open to it.
Not yet. I've not had that experience yet. We get a lot of students who are interested in publishing, but they're interested in the, not so much environmental publishing. So we do hear from writers who are really interested in environmental publishing. They might contact us outside of our submission period and say, where can we go? And, we try to point them to the resources that we have on Ecolit Books. So Ecolit Books is for readers, but it's also for writers. We have a lot of opportunities for writers and lists of magazines and other publishers that publish environmental writing. So, there's curiosity from writers and readers, but not so much from the publishing industry that I've seen. No one's reached out to us to say, tell us more about your environmental publishing. So, but they are doing more of it.
That's kind of interesting.
And that might just be a coincidence. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this. It feels like it's the verge of it. Like we've seen this sort of thing in so many other spaces, that places that you wouldn't expect an environmental message, an animal rights message, a vegan message, that even the word vegan to pop up, and it's starting to. So it just wouldn't. Just from speaking to other people in different industries, there's been a bit of that I've noticed, that them sort of saying that people who were previously resistant to them or had previously sort of shut the door and said, no, we don't want to get involved in what you're doing, have sort of come back and said, actually, what was it again? So I'm kind of, I feel like it might be on the verge. I hope so.
I hope so too. And I think films like Don't Look Up bring these things, and celebrity vegans, that's a slippery slope, because so many celebrities go vegan and then change their minds. And actually, John has a really funny play called Veganish that's about just that, about a celebrity vegan that gets caught eating a burger at a restaurant.
Right.
And one of his fans calls him out on it. It's just a short play about this dramatic little moment. But I also think that, the more people, the more we see it, and if people who are trendsetters embrace it, then more people just wake up and pay attention and start doing it. And, as a small boutique publisher, we're not big trendsetters, but we're just going to keep doing it. I'm surprised I'm not surprised we're still here. It doesn't surprise me at all, but I think it surprises most people. I remember when we first started it, people just straight up told us we were crazy to start a publishing company in 2011, and here we are. So, and we're gonna be here for till the end of time. So, eventually people will discover this, and but it's not so much about discovering us, but just discovering this literature and getting the word out there about saving animals.
Well, more power to you for not only starting a publishing company, but front and center saying, not being shy about saying we're vegans and we want to talk about environmental issues and that. Like, I can imagine that combination of things. If you'd have asked one of your contacts in the mainstream publishing world, they would have said, you really are crazy. Like, not only starting a publishing company, but nailing your colours to the mast. So I say more power to you. I think it's incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, you do double down on the crazy in some people's minds. So.
Yeah, well, I think it's there's that old TED talk about the lone nut, and people start to join them on the hillside. I feel like that's the way things are going. We've seen it in so many different industries. Maybe food's probably the most obvious pioneering sort of space, but obviously we're in veganuary right now as we're talking, and we're seeing the word all over I saw that. I don't know if you have Compare the Market over in the US. Do you have that? Is that a thing? I don't know. No. So it's kind of an irrelevancy really, the Compare the Market itself, but it's a business over here that essentially like allows you to compare things like energy bills and energy suppliers and telephone bills and all these kind of things. Anyway, they ran this whole advert on which was about, is veganism expensive? And somebody I know who's in this sort of marketing business was sort of overjoyed with it, because although there was a question mark there, the whole point was this is a company who have no business talking about veganism at all. Normally, it's not nothing to do with it, but they're talking about it, and it's just a sign of it's in the zeitgeist, it's in the conversation. People are thinking and making these connections. Even on the I know we've referenced Don't Look Up a lot, but the Don't Look Up website has connections to what you can eat. It doesn't squarely say be vegan, but it essentially says more that if you eat more plants and you eat less meat, so you can do the maths. Is essentially that's what it is saying. So it's there. I think the more spaces we pop up in, the better, really.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think we saw that need in books, where people aren't like reading vegan. And it's the subtlety of it works really well in fiction, to have a vegan character. In My Last Continent, my character is pretty subtly vegan. It doesn't come up a lot. And then her romantic interest is vegan as well, which is a big deal for her to find someone in her world. My experience on this expedition and working with scientists for the research I did for the book is that very few scientists are vegan or even vegetarian. So that was interesting and it played out in the book a little bit. But I think, the more it just kind of comes up in mainstream everything, this is a good thing. It's all good.
I love that normalization. Just the subtlety of it. It's just it's not her character. It's just a thing that is part of her character. I think what a great way to express it to people in a non-judgmental, non-scary kind of way, but will definitely leave a mark. Will get you thinking. Oh yeah, they're vegan. And why was it a big deal that they were trying to find another vegan? Like, as we all know who are in the world, it is a big deal.
Yeah, exactly.
There's literally vegan dating apps now, and these kind of things. Yeah. So it's definitely a big deal, 100%. So again, I think what a wonderful way to sort of be an activist. Really, activists come in all forms and fiction and writing and publishing is certainly an area that we could all do with more of a vegan touch. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for saying that. I love that.
Time is getting on, but I want to absolutely make sure that folks know where to find Ashland Creek, where to get a copy of that amazing new novel coming out in February, and where to get in touch if they've got a submission. I don't know if I don't want to overburden you with submissions, but
no worries.
If you're outside of a submission deadline, you don't have to share that bit. But if you're close to one or you'd like to, then do feel free.
So people can find us at ashlandcreekpress.com. And there you can find Athena's book, My Days of Dark Green Euphoria. It comes out February 1st. So if people are hearing this before the 1st, it's available for pre-order. So they can pre-order it from any number of retailers. And you can buy it through our website or, again, your favorite bookstore, favorite retailer online. It'll be available everywhere, and it's actually available throughout the world, so it doesn't matter where you live. It's English only, but it's available everywhere. So that comes out shortly. And submissions, everything's on the website. You just have to explore a little. We're closed to submissions right now, but we have a mailing list that people can join if they want to know when we open up again. So it's just ashlandcreekpress.com.
Well, I'll get writing.
Yes.
Midge, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing listening to your journey, and like I said a couple of times, but more power to you for being vegan in this space. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you and your wonderful podcast, and it's an honor to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Midge. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by Veg One from the Vegan Society. Veg One is the nutritional vitamin and mineral supplement designed for vegans by vegans. Launched back in 2005 and rebranded in 2021 with a fantastic new plastic-free package, Veg One provides nutritional support alongside a healthy and balanced vegan diet, all for an affordable price. With a 6-month supply available for just £12.70, Veg One will cost you little over £2 a month and offers EU nutrient reference values, or NRVs, of vitamin B12, D3, iodine, selenium, B2, B6 and folic acid. Veg One is chewable, it's affordable and reliable, you can take it once a day, it's available in fantastic orange and blackcurrant flavours, super easy and convenient, completely plastic free. So why not head over to vegansociety.com, search for Veg One and take your next healthy steps into the world of veganism.